Hello and welcome to the first ever episode of Cheesesteaks and Controllers. Man, I have waited a long time to say that. My name is Jason Fanelli, and I am the Esports Insider and expert on all things gaming for Fox PHL The Gambler, and you are listening right here on the iHeartRadio app to this brand new gaming-focused podcast where we will talk about all of the hottest news, all the games coming out, all the games we have already played, and the biggest esports news there is. I am very excited to kick this off, and I want to thank each and every one of you that is listening to these words right now. To be honest, this is a dream come true, and the fact that Sean Brace and the Fox PHL The Gambler team have given me this opportunity really means a lot, and I hope I make them proud and you entertained. Let's get right into it with the 6 in 60 seconds. Sony unveiled the PlayStation 5 on Thursday night in a 1-hour-long presentation, with 27 games also being featured, among them a new Spider-Man game and Horizon Forbidden West from Guerrilla. Elsewhere, Bungie expanded on their next Destiny 2 expansion, Beyond Light, while the IGN Expo unveiled a ton of new games between days 1 and 2, including a brand new Nickelodeon kart racers for the kids. Meanwhile, the Call of Duty League will be kicking off its Minnesota home series this weekend, with 5 of the top 5 teams being featured. The NBA 2K League announced the tip-off, powered by AT&T, a 7-group tournament featuring all 23 teams. And the Overwatch League's Summer Showdown kicks off this weekend with 3 weeks of qualifying matches before the actual tournament on July 4th weekend. That is your 6 in 60 seconds. Yes, so I thought I would start every week off with a couple of snappy headlines from the previous week. 3 from general gaming, 3 from esports on a good week, mixing and matching as needed, just to give you an idea of the biggest things that you missed and what you should look into after you're done listening, or while you're listening to me talk about the gaming industry. Sony was a big one, IGN Expo was a big one, the Call of Duty and Overwatch Leagues doing their thing this weekend. A lot to look forward to in both aspects. But tonight, for our first topic, the first ever topic of the Cheesesteaks and Controllers podcast, if you listen to me when I go on weekly with Sean Brace during the Daily Ticket, you may be wondering, who are the Philadelphia Fusion? What is the Overwatch League? Or, maybe generally, what is Overwatch? We talk about it every week. They are the biggest team, esports, in Philadelphia at the moment. So I figured I would take some time in this first episode to go over Overwatch, to explain the Overwatch League and a little bit of its history and how each match is played and what the next couple of weeks entail for the league and for the Philadelphia Fusion as a whole. And then I'll wrap things up by introducing you to the team as they stand right now, and some of the big names that you should know off the jump. So, first and foremost, what is Overwatch? So Overwatch is a team-based, multiplayer, first-person shooter developed by a company called Blizzard Entertainment. For those who have no idea what video games are, Blizzard Entertainment also makes World of Warcraft. That has been one of the biggest games for 16 years and counting, debuting in 2004 for the first time. And Blizzard has been around longer than that. So this is one of the biggest and most tenured companies in the industry making this Overwatch game. Each team consists of 6 players, And those 6 players each choose from a roster of 32 in-game characters, each character having its own unique abilities and characteristics. Now, each of those 32 characters fall into one of 3 categories. You have your damage, who are your attackers. You have tanks, who are the heavy damage-absorbing characters that sit in the front line and take the initial onslaught during a skirmish. And then you have your healers and buffers in support, who stay in the back and keep everybody else healthy or buff their attacks or things like that. Some of the characters that you should know, some of the biggest characters currently in the game right now. Let's start with the damage heroes. If you're watching the Philadelphia Fusion, you're going to hear a lot about a character named McCree. McCree is an American bounty hunter and has a Wild West motif. He uses a 6-shooter that he calls Peacekeeper, and it just shoots single shots at high accuracy. So this Carpe, who is a star player we'll get into later, uses this McCree very effectively, moves around the map. Every shot he fires is hitting one of the opponents with an accuracy that I have never been able to achieve in any game I've ever played before. So McCree is definitely one of the damage characters to know, as is Mei, who in-game, her name is Mei Ling Zhu. She is a Chinese climatologist, and she uses ice-based attacks, as including a short-range ice spray or a long-range icicle, and she can freeze herself to shield herself or freeze others to freeze them in place for obvious advantage reasons. So Mei is another character to know. As far as tanks, the biggest tank, the main tank, and the character who, in the short time I played Overwatch, I would use, he's named Reinhardt. He is a giant knight in a big suit of armor, wields a massive hammer, and serves as the perfect front-line player whenever a match starts. He can produce a giant shield that can absorb even more damage, called a barrier field. He uses something called Fire Strike, which is just a flaming projectile. And he also has a rocket booster that allows him to charge into enemies and crush them against the walls. He is awesome, and if you ever wanted to try a tank, I would definitely recommend Reinhardt to be the guy. But there's also perhaps the most famous, if not second most famous character in the entire game. That would be D.Va, D.Va. In the story, she is a South Korean mecha pilot. She is a former pro gamer, so she's esports within an esports game. Getting a little meta there. And she drives a giant mech, a big old tank with twin cannons that don't need any reload, that don't need ammunition. She can just shoot at will. She can fly around in short bursts with her rocket boosters, and she can fire micro missiles for massive damage and splash damage across multiple players. Splash damage being when an explosion happens, anybody in the radius of the explosion takes a little bit of damage. And then for support, the two support heroes that you will see the most in on the Fusion are Lucio, who is a Brazilian DJ, and his abilities allow him to heal teammates or increase their movement speed, as well as boost those effects even more with an ability called Amp It Up. And then there's also Mercy, who is in the story a Swiss field medic and first responder, but she looks like an angel. She wears this giant winged suit called a Valkyrie suit, and she can heal her teammates or boost their damage output at the same time, while also having gun to protect herself. And she can revive an ally, so she is a very important part of the team when she's being used. But I digress. So those are some of the characters that you're going to see when you're watching an Overwatch match. But that was just 6, and there are 32. So there's a little bit of research you might have to do to learn those characters. Excuse me. Each match in Overwatch, particularly in the Overwatch League, is objective-based. This is not one of those shooter games where you're just trying to rack up as many kills against the enemy as possible. You're going to want to focus on the objectives at hand in the match type that you're playing, and use and complete those objectives in order to take your team to victory. So in Overwatch League, there are 4 formats to focus on. The first one is called Assault, and this has 1 team on offense and 1 team on defense. And the offensive team must capture 2 targets in sequence. So the first target will be a little ways away from where they start the match, and the second target will be a little further up and closer to where the enemy team is spawning whenever they lose a life. And once they capture, in order to capture, the team has to descend on the point, stay within the circle until the bar completely fills. There are 3 segments in the bar that need to fill before they claim the objective. And then they move on to the second objective. If they are able to claim the second objective, they get 2 points. If they only claim the first objective, they get 1 point. If they claim nothing, they get no points. And then the teams switch, and the second team can try their hand at capturing the objectives. If one team scores more points than the other team, then obviously that team wins. If there's a tie, there will go to a tiebreaker round where I believe one team is on offense, and if they can claim both, they win. If they can't, then the defense team wins. That's how that works, I'm pretty sure. Escort missions. Escort missions are like the hallmark of Overwatch. The escort mission type is where one team must escort a payload, a hovering vehicle or a vehicle of some kind that contains a whole bunch of items or bombs or what have you, and they must escort it across a map while the other team tries to repel them. The payload in this escort mission only moves when the team is right next to it. So the more teammates you have next to this payload, the faster it goes up the predetermined track towards its final destination. Now, the payload does not move off of this track. It stays right on the same path, so the offensive team always knows where to go to make it progress, and the defensive team always knows where to go to stop it. There are 2 checkpoints along the route, and then it will reach its final destination. The team gains a point for each of those destinations that it hits, checkpoint 1, checkpoint 2, and the final destination, and then they switch once again. Now, if the first team only captures 1 or 2 of the points, the game will also mention how far they traveled in the stage, and if the other team can advance past that point, then they will take the win in that round. So it's about moving this payload from point A to point B, a couple of checkpoints in between, and the teams skirmishing as the advancing is happening. The third type is hybrid. Hybrid is both assault and escort one at a time. So where assault had 2 objectives, the team on offense will capture the first objective, and then that will unlock a payload, and then they must take the payload to the final objective in order to win. So it's a mixture of the first 2 that we just talked about in a neat little hybrid fashion, hence being called hybrid, that kind of mixes things up and doesn't just have teams focusing on one type of match. Hybrid is my favorite to watch. I just feel like the different strategies that change in between capturing the point of assault and then moving the payload keeps teams on their toes. I feel like they're the most action-packed ways to watch Overwatch League. And then finally you have control, where there is a single point on a map. These maps are completely symmetrical, so the teams have equal distance when they start to this point. And the teams basically fight over this point until one team's capture percentage reaches 100%. There's a little bit of time that takes place before that percentage will start racking up. I believe it's 3 seconds before a team actually claims the point as their own, and then the percentage will start to increase. First team to 100 wins, but the nature of these matches is that they're faster than the other match types, so they're always played in best of 3. Whoever captures the control point twice wins. So it's a lot to take in, I do agree, but when you're watching it, It's really not all that difficult once you know what to look for. If you hear assault, then you know it's the two objectives. If you hear escort, then you're going to be watching the little car drive up the path. If it's hybrid, then it's both. And if it's control, then it's the singular point where everybody descends on that point and fights over it for the entire match. Very, very fun game. A lot of fun to really make teams and strategize with players. And it's very interesting on the eyes. A lot of fun to watch. And I do recommend picking up the Overwatch League. It's always on YouTube, and we're going to get into that right now. The Overwatch League is an esports league centered around Overwatch, which formed back in 2016, just after the game was released. The first season actually kicked off, however, in 2018 with 12 teams. This was the first city-based esports league of its kind, meaning that the teams, even though they're owned by larger entities, for example, the Fusion are owned by Comcast Spectacor, the names of the teams contained the cities that they're in. So Philadelphia Fusion, New York Excelsior, etc. Most of the other esports leagues just followed the organizations that the esports organizations themselves, like Cloud9 or FlyQuest or things like that. This was the first one to incorporate the cities and really give it that familiar tone for those who might not be familiar with esports. 20 teams are currently in the league now. They expanded with 8 more teams for season number 2. And those 20 teams hail from 6 countries: the US, Canada, the UK, France, China, and South Korea. The league is normally broke up into 2 conferences, Atlantic Conference and Pacific Conference, with 2 divisions in each conference. So, if we break that down, the Atlantic Conference, the North Division, hosts the Boston Uprising, the London Spitfire, the New York Excelsior, the Paris Eternal, and the Toronto Defiant, where the Atlantic South is the Atlanta Reign, the Florida Mayhem, the Houston Outlaws, your Philadelphia Fusion, and the Washington Justice. The Pacific East is the Chengdu Hunters from Chengdu, China, the Guangzhou Charge, also from China, the Hangzhou Spark, also from China, the Seoul Dynasty from Seoul, South Korea, and the Shanghai Dragons from Shanghai, China. And finally, the Pacific West Division is the Dallas Fuel, the Los Angeles Gladiators, the Los Angeles Valiant, the San Francisco Shock, and the Vancouver Titans. Now, you may find it strange that a Philadelphia team is in the South Division of the Atlantic Conference, but if you look at a map of where the cities are in the Atlantic Conference, they basically are in the South. The Defiant in Toronto are north of us. New York Excelsior is north of us. Boston Uprising is north of us. London Spitfire is north of us. And Paris is the only one that's a little bit south, but they kept the European teams together. Makes sense to me. So those are the 20 teams and how the league structure shakes out. Teams play weekly matches following a set weekly schedule, not unlike traditional sports leagues. Some teams will play 2 matches on a weekend. I don't think any team plays more than 3, but they definitely play at least 1 every weekend. And at the end of the season, the standings are listed, the tiebreakers are taken care of, and the playoffs are set. Now, this year is a little bit different because of the pandemic for 2 reasons. One, this was supposed to be the first season where the teams hosted matches in their cities, but COVID-19 took care of that. And also, the divisions sort of changed because of where teams are currently located while they're quarantining because of the pandemic. So they had to split it to the North America region, which has 13 teams, and the Asia region, which has 7. Uneven, unfortunately, but it was just the best way to really shake out the rosters or the teams so that the games could be played as cleanly as possible. Because of that, starting in May with the May Melee, continuing this weekend with the Summer Showdown, and then finishing in August with whatever that tournament's going to be called, The Overwatch League is adopting a tournament-style format for the last few weeks of the league. So, starting this weekend for the Summer Showdown, each team will play 3 matches, 1 per week for the next 3 weeks. At the end of those 3 weeks, we'll take the records and tiebreakers and determine brackets. And then there will be a bracket in the Asia region with those 7 teams, and a bracket in the North America region with those 13 teams, which will then play each other until a winner is decided. Winners will get 3 wins in the standings. Second place gets 2. Third and fourth get 1 each, as well as the prize money. And then after all these tournaments finish, after the Summer Showdown tournament and after the August tournament, the standings will be balanced, the playoff tree will be drafted, and it'll be playoff time. The great thing about this league is, and I mentioned this with Sean Brace on our weekly spot this week, all of these games happen one at a time. So you have a chance to check out every single team of the league on a weekend that they play, provided you're awake for the 4 a.m. Asia region matches. But the opportunity is there. So you could get not only familiar with the game of Overwatch, but also every team in the league within a weekend, which is very, very cool and an interesting and easy entry point. So youtube.com/Overwatch League is the best place to see that. But finally, and most importantly, who are the Fusion? Who are Philadelphia's Overwatch League team? Well, they are one of the original 12 Overwatch League teams. They've been in every season so far. And, in fact, they were the runner-up in the first ever Overwatch League finals, losing to the London Spitfire. That's a shame that they lost it, but the first ever finals is definitely an achievement worth holding your head up for. They did not make the playoffs in 2019. They lost in the play-in tournament that would have qualified them for the playoffs. But as of right now, they are first overall in the entire league with only 1 loss in regular season play. Now, they did lose in the semifinals of the May Melee tournament, but when you're in the brackets of the tournament, the losses don't count in the standings. So, the 1 regular season loss happens to stand. Do I expect that to continue with 1 loss? Not necessarily, considering that we have the defending champion San Francisco Shock as one of our qualifiers in this Summer Showdown. I do not expect that to go well for us. Just going to put that out there. So that would be a match to watch, though, if you want to see the two of the top teams in the league square off. That would be a great entry point into the league itself and your Philadelphia Fusion. But the roster of the Fusion, the players' names that you'll be hearing throughout any matches of theirs that you'll be watching. There are 5 damage players, so that the players that are concerned with inflicting damage on the opponents. 3 tanks who absorb the damage and stand on the front line, and 3 support players. The biggest names to watch out for are Carpe, who is one of the best players in the entire league, let alone our team. Ivy, or EQO, those two tend to alternate as the second damage player, with Hisu also coming in from time to time. And Chipsa, a great player from the United Kingdom who has not had a chance to really flourish on the Fusion yet, but I feel like his time is coming. Our 3 tanks are Sado, Poco, and Fury. And then our 3 support players are Funny Astro, Boombox, and Alarm. Now, I know they sound silly, but the players in the Overwatch League use handles, not unlike the gamer tags on PlayStation Network and Xbox Live, in order to identify themselves to their fan bases. So, because it's a lot easier to say Carpe than it is to say Lee Jae Hyuk, his Carpe's real name, which I probably just butchered. And if he happens to listen to this, I'm sorry. But that is our roster at the moment. These kids, these players have been very, very good this season with only 1 loss. If there was ever a season for this Philadelphia area to get into the Fusion, to really start to support this team and learn Overwatch, this is the season, because this team, one loss, two losses if you include the Melee tournament. They're successful, they're efficient, and they're good. And nothing makes Philadelphia happier than winners. So I feel like now is the time, if you wanted to get into the Fusion, if you had any interest at all, to give it a shot, starting this Sunday, June the 14th, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, when their first Summer Showdown qualifier takes place. So yeah, that is Overwatch in a nutshell. It's a lot of information to take in. I know if you require multiple listens to get it all, or if you want to try the game out for yourself, I highly recommend it. It's a lot of fun. And yeah, watch the Fusion on youtube.com/Overwatch League. Get used to them, learn them, because I have a feeling they're going to be around for a long, long time. And now we're going to move to a segment of the show where we talk about what games are coming out this week for you to enjoy. So get out your glasses and have a taste of what's on tap. 3 featured titles this week on tap, most of which having to do with first-person shooting and a little bit of strategy thrown in. The first is Project Warlock, which is a first-person shooter game coming to PC, Switch, PlayStation 4, and Xbox One, developed by Buckshot Software and published by a gaming company called The Gaming Company. This game is notable because the main programmer is an 18-year-old who developed the game while still in high school, and it looks really, really fun. So definitely something to check out there. Also, Desperados 3, a real-time strategy tactics game developed by a studio called Me Games, being published by THQ Nordic. That is coming to PC, PlayStation 4, and Xbox One as well. And finally, Disintegration, an upcoming first-person shooter developed by V1 Interactive, published by Private Division, also for PC, PlayStation 4, and Xbox One. This is a first-person shooter with a development directed by Marcus Leto, who is a co-creator of the Halo series, trying to strike gold once again with Disintegration. So you have Desperados 3, Disintegration, and Project Warlock coming up, with a major release looming next Friday in The Last of Us Part 2. We'll talk about that next week. But for now, that's what's on tap. All right, there you have it. That is what's on tap for this week. Big week coming up next week, like I said, with The Last of Us Part 2. That's going to be one of the biggest releases of the summer, and certainly one of the biggest releases left on the PlayStation 4 before the PlayStation 5 takes over this holiday season. And speaking of which, as I mentioned at the top of the show in the 6 and 60, the PlayStation 5 was officially unveiled on Thursday, June the 11th at 4 o'clock in the afternoon Eastern Time, and boy, oh boy, did it impress. And so for topic number 2 this evening, we are going to talk about that PS5 event. We're going to go announcement by announcement, step by step, talk about my thoughts on each one, and let you know, if you missed it, what went down and what you should be looking for as soon as this podcast is over. There was a lot of games shown off, which is what they said they were going to do. Back in February, they had a little talk on their YouTube channel that went into the real nitty-gritty of the technology of the system. But this, they said, was going to be all about the future of gaming, and I would say they delivered on that, with over 20 games featured, with the actual console, even though it looks like a Wi-Fi router, but hey, I'm not one to judge. So let's get right to it. It started off with that classic PlayStation startup noise, the one that as soon as I hear it, 10-year-old me just jumps out and I get goosebumps. It's one of my favorite sound effects in gaming of all time. It just gives me such a warm, happy feeling. That's how this thing started. So they had us in the right mindset from the very beginning. Boom, we were in. And it kicked off with a Rockstar logo. Now, Rockstar Games is the developer of Grand Theft Auto, Red Dead Redemption, and more. So anytime you see their logo showing up anywhere, it's a big deal. This was the announcement of a port of GTA 5, which initially came out in 2013 for the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, to the PlayStation 5, presumably at launch. It's a good idea. Grand Theft Auto 5 still sells like crazy. It is officially the best-selling video game of all time. I believe over 70 million sales. I'm going to look this up for you right now. Oh, I'm sorry. I got that wrong. 120 million copies sold since that initial launch in 2013. Now, granted, it's been on 4 consoles, PlayStation 3 and 4, Xbox 360, and Xbox One. But 120 million is nothing to sneeze at. And with the online still making gangbusters with its online, with the in-game currency, Shark dollars or whatever it is, the Shark cards, there's no reason why this should go away, especially if Grand Theft Auto 6 isn't ready yet. I honestly don't think Grand Theft Auto 6 is coming until 2023. Rockstar seems content in releasing one game every 5 or 6 years. 5 years was the amount of time between Grand Theft Auto 5 and Red Dead Redemption 2. So, hey, put Grand Theft Auto 5 on the PS5, upgrade it for free for PS4 owners, let that satiate them until 6 is ready. Makes sense to me. So, great way to kick things off on this PlayStation conference. We then see PlayStation boss Jim Ryan. He comes out to introduce everyone. This conference really took a E3 press conference feel. That's why I keep calling it that. It's not a press conference. It's just a presentation. There was no audience. There was no stage. There was no theatrics. There was nothing. But it felt like that same format that they have been doing for the last couple of years when they've gone to E3, where people come out to talk a little bit, then the game is introduced, there's little breaks in between, and it just felt like this was produced to be a stage show, but then there wasn't a stage to show it on, so they just had to do it digitally. Is that a bad thing? No. It's a very good way to keep your interest. But that's what it felt like watching this for the first time. After we see Jim Ryan, we then get our first brand new PlayStation 5 game, and that is Spider-Man Miles Morales, a follow-up to Marvel's Spider-Man from 2018, now starring Miles Morales instead of Peter Parker. I am all about this for many reasons, one of which is it gives me a reason to play Marvel Spider-Man, which I own and just not have put into my console. Now I will do this in anticipation of Miles Morales. So cool. Yeah, more Spider-Man is always a good thing. The little bit I have played is very, very good. And the trailer looked wonderful, really showed off what the PS5 can do. So that would be a trailer I would definitely recommend you searching out. Our next game was Gran Turismo 7. Now, Gran Turismo has been around for a very long time by a developer called Polyphony Digital, owned by Sony. It's one of Sony's proprietary studios. Gran Turismo is one of the most famous racing series there is. Hit a bit of a lull for a little while, I feel like. Gran Turismo's 5 and 6 were not that great. 1 and 2 are the peak. 2 is the absolute peak. Hopefully 7 captures some of that nostalgic magic once again, because it deserves to be around. I feel like Gran Turismo and Forza are just one of the best rivalries in gaming. Forza comes out more often, but when Gran Turismo comes out, it really shines. So that is definitely one to look for, especially if you're a sports or racing fan. Gran Turismo 7 should be on your list. After that, we move on to Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. Ratchet & Clank is a adventure platformer style game, very action heavy. Just a series I have never gotten into. I don't really know why, but those kind of games I equate to Nintendo. It's like a Mario 64 or a Zelda, not so much Breath of the Wild, but the Zeldas before that. That's where I go when I want this type of genre. I'm sure Ratchet & Clank is very good. It's just not something that I personally have ever been able to get into. But this one, with its during the gameplay, rifts are actually opening in space and time, and Ratchet, the main character, is using them to his advantage, pulling himself in, pushing enemies through, falling through. The level in front of him is manipulating itself on the fly. Just amazing looking technology there, and it's a family friendly game. So maybe I can get my daughter into it. Maybe she would like it if it doesn't scare her. She is still 4, so if it's rated like E10 might not be quite where she is yet, where she might not be quite where it is yet. But it's definitely something I will keep an eye on. And if there's ever a chance to go back and play the other games, I would like to do that. Square Enix then came out with a game called Project Aether, which means it doesn't have a real name yet. But for a tech demo or for an initial demo of what they're going for, it really, really looked impressive. Some amazing vistas as she's jumping over stones and these cliffs. Just you can see the sky and the mountain range in the background. Really, really, really impressive looking stuff. And if it ends up being Final Fantasy 16, I wouldn't be surprised. Next, from a publisher called Annapurna Interactive, one of the best indie publishers out there right now. Whenever I see Annapurna, my ears perk up because every game they've put out that I've played has been good. This new one, it's showing, we see a bit of a futuristic cyberpunk sci-fi world. We're in a big city, and there's neon lights and robots and all kinds of weird things going on. And then we see a cat. Normal, run-of-the-mill cat. Just a cat. Sitting around, looking around, walking around. And then we see the name of the game is called Stray, which makes me think that we're going to play as a stray cat. That is definitely something I have never done before. And I can't say I hate it. I mean, I love games that try new things. I love especially indie titles who like to break the mold and do something different. So if Annapurna wants to make me play as a stray cat, I'll definitely give it a shot. In 2021, sure, I will adopt that stray cat. Let's do it. We then had a little bit of a trailer with the technology inside the system, the solid-state drive, the ray tracing graphic abilities. Another look at the brand new DualSense controller for the PlayStation 5 with its built-in microphone, the haptic feedback where if you press the trigger or press the buttons, it reacts to your touch. Not only how hard you touch, but it will also rumble on your fingers. Interesting little idea there. And then we move on to a couple other games from the PlayStation Studios themselves. Housemarque, who for the PlayStation 4 released a game called Resogun, definitely one to look into if you have not, has a new game that looked like something out of Prometheus or Alien called Returnal. Return AL. Definitely interesting. Most notable here was the facial expressions coming from the main character. That is one I would have you look at for sure. And then, if you're familiar, and then Little Big Planet, Sumo Digital, brand new Little Big Planet game. Little Big Planet was a game for PlayStation 3 and PlayStation 4 where you could create your own Mario-style platforming levels and play them and share them with friends. This looks to be more of a dedicated adventure with no customization that we know of yet, at least not at the level, for the levels, maybe for costumes and stuff like that. It's called Sackboy: A Big Adventure, starring Sackboy, which is a great name for a character. It just is. And then we moved on to a couple of other smaller titles, one called Destruction All-Stars, which looks like a Destruction Derby Twisted Metal style game. Kena, Bridge of Spirits, which was a very, very striking action title. Had a bit of Zelda Breath of the Wild vibes to it. That is one that I'm going to keep an eye on that could really impress me. And it sounded like Kerry Tagawa, who for many other things is the man who played Shang Tsung in the live-action Mortal Kombat movie. I feel like I was hearing his voice there, but maybe I'm just partial to it because he also plays Shang Tsung in the current Mortal Kombat game, Mortal Kombat 11. He reprised his role, so maybe I'm just in tune on that voice. But a very cool thing there. It looks like it switches to a cartoon, but it's actually a game called Goodbye Volcano High, with which, if the graphics that they showed in this trailer are the graphics in the game, it looks like you're playing a Saturday morning cartoon, and that is astounding. Everyone thinks about the graphical updates that these consoles get in the way of making the environments look better or making facial expressions look better, but there's other things that developers can do that we wouldn't even think of, and something like that is exactly the kind of thing I love about when developers do something different. So Goodbye Volcano High. I don't know if it's going to be that the subject matter is going to be something that takes me, but I'm definitely going to look into it for the way that it looks, for sure. And then we had a new entry in an old series that has not been around since the save for a remake, since the original Xbox, and that's Oddworld. Oddworld Soulstorm is the new game. The originals were Abe's Odyssey and Abe's Exodus. Oddworld stars this little creature named Abe. He is a Mudokon, is his name. He's a real skinny guy trying to save his kind from being made into food by these evil gluckins, I believe they're called. It's a very strange, very out there concept, but a classic PlayStation 1 series coming back to the PlayStation 5, which is pretty cool. Then we had a couple of other interesting games, one from Bethesda and their developer Tango Gameworks called Ghostwire Tokyo, a little paranormal action set in Tokyo. Moving on to Jet the Far Shore, which was a super intriguing sci-fi adventure strategy type game. I would recommend you look into that trailer. Just had a lot of things going for it, and it's that's one of those games that could sneak up on you and then just surprise everyone and be a smash hit at the end of the year. Couple other indie titles of note. Solar Ash, another game from Annapurna, is one that I would look into. Godfall, which was the first PlayStation 5 game we ever heard about, which seems like it's merging the Dark Souls hack and slash action genre with Destiny's looting features. So that might be one to look into. We'll have to see a little more of it before it comes out in the fall. Then we had a sequel to Hitman. Hitman 3 is coming back. The bald assassin in the black suit is coming back for more action, which is pretty cool. A couple of other notable games throughout were NBA 2K21. Got our first look at that on PlayStation 5. It's not a lot of action. It's just Zion Williamson in a gym by himself dribbling and dunking. But man, does it look like they ripped it right out of him, like pictures or video of him actually practicing. If that's what the sports games are going to look like in action, that is just unreal. And we are in for a great console cycle with the PlayStation 5. Speaking of Dark Souls, Demon's Souls, the original Souls game that came out in 2009 for the PlayStation. 2008 for the 2009. I was right. 2009 for the PlayStation 3 is being completely remade from the ground up for the PlayStation 5, which had a lot of my friends very happy. So Demon's Souls coming back is very cool. And then we had some heavy hitters at the end here. 4 heavy hitters right at the end of the presentation. The first one, also from Bethesda and their studio Arcane Studios, is called Death Loop. So it's got a pulp retro feel to it. It's a first-person shooter game where one of the players is tasked with assassinating certain people within a time limit, but there's also another assassin there who's trying to stop you because she's protecting the city, and every time you die, you start the loop over again. Just a lot of time bending and weird special powers going on that Arcane are known for in their previous games, Dishonored and Dishonored 2. So that one could be very, very cool. We were then treated to a trailer with a lot of scary imagery, the woods, some enemies, some like flashing things on screen. Then we see the word village. And then in the word village, the V, the I, and the 2 long vertical lines of the L are highlighted to make the number or the Roman numeral 8, and it's Resident Evil 8 Village or Resident Evil Village, the next game in the Resident Evil saga. That'll make Sean Brace very happy. It's going to be first person again, like Resident Evil 7 was. Looks to be very, very, very creepy, very, very, very on point for Resident Evil, and a game that I'll probably watch somebody else play. Because while I love their stories, I just can't handle them. I hate to admit it, but that's the truth. And then Capcom came up with another game out of nowhere called Pragmata, a brand new property, a game they had never, or a franchise they had never made before. It's brand new, coming in 2022 to PlayStation 5. And the fact that they're making brand new IPs is awesome. Anytime a big company goes after a brand new idea, I am all about trying it out. Because that's where a lot of good games come from. Like if Ubisoft never tried Assassin's Creed, it wouldn't be where it is today. Same with Mass Effect. Same with any franchise, really. So if they want to try out Pragmata and they want me to play it, I'm in. And then the last actual game, I say Lance, and I'll explain why in a minute, game that we saw was a sequel to one of the best games on the PlayStation 4, Horizon Zero Dawn. That is Horizon 2 Forbidden West. Not much shown in way of story, but we did get some of the massive mechanical monsters that made the first game so cool. A couple of new ones, like a mammoth and a turtle. A couple of returning ones, like the alligator and the ram that she can ride. This game, if you've owned a PlayStation 4 and you have not played Horizon Zero Dawn yet, I implore you to do so. The open world is interesting and rich and full of things to do. The story is dynamite, one of the best stories on the console, and it's just a game that I highly recommend. Can't recommend it enough. And now we have a sequel coming soon, which is awesome. And Lance Reddick, which some people know as Abaddon from Lost, I believe, or was it Fringe? Fringe? Let me see. Was he pretty? I know he was in. He was in The Wire. He played Cedric in The Wire. He played Johnny Basil in Oz, and Matthew Abaddon in Lost. Yes, that's exactly who I thought it was. He is in. He is back for Horizon 2. He was in the first game as a character named Silence. So that is cool to see him back for more. So that was a nice way to end the show with games. However, that is not what ended the show. What actually ended the show was the first look at the actual console, the PlayStation 5 itself. And when I tell you that it looks like a Wi-Fi router, it does. It looks like a sleek, futuristic, awesome Wi-Fi router, but it looks like a Wi-Fi router all the same. Two versions were shown, the PlayStation 5 and a PlayStation 5 Digital Edition, which is just the PlayStation 5, but more symmetrical because it has no disk drive. It'll just be downloads. What was not shown off, and I believe this is most worrisome, was the price tag. The fact that they went through this entire presentation and did not tell us how much we're going to be paying for this thing is worrisome to me. The reason being is I have a feeling that they're going to come in more expensive than the Xbox, and they didn't want Xbox to have that free PR or that free advantage. So they're holding their cards to their chest until Xbox decides to announce their price. Xbox has their big presentation in July. We don't have a date on that yet, but that's when they're doing it. I fully expect their price tag to be announced there. So interesting times for the PlayStation 5 there, and not having a price. Definitely not a decision I agree with. I would like to know how much this is going to cost now or sooner rather than later. But it does also post an interesting idea with the digital versus non-digital. If they're the same price, but the digital has a larger hard drive because you're going to be downloading everything, which way do you go? I'm not entirely sure. I like having game cases. I like having them displayed or having racks of cases on a shelf. But at the same time, I have been downloading more games recently as opposed to buying them outright. So I don't know. I don't know which way I'm going to go with that. But all in all, a very impressive PlayStation 5 event today. The console looks sleek and Wi-Fi routery. No, I do like the console design. It's pretty good. The games that they showed ranged from heavy hitters and powerhouses to small little indie titles that capture the breadth and the power of the console from small, and really shows that from small studios all the way to the big ones, there's a lot to offer here in the PS5. So we will see in the future the next time they decide to update us. I would imagine that would be around Gamescom and the end of August. But we have the PlayStation 5. We can see it now. We know some of the games that are coming for it. And there's a lot to like for Sony fans. Sony fans should be very excited about the future of their favorite console. But So that's the conversation there. Before we sign off for the night, however, let's do something I like to call the speed run. Okay, welcome to the speed run, where we go through 2 or 3 stories and spend a little time on them. Different from the 6 and 60 seconds, where those are just little blips, headlines. Here, I kind of want to dig a little deeper into the topics that I talk about, just to give a little idea of where I stand on it. So first, I want to talk about Destiny 2. I mentioned it during the 6 and 60 seconds, how they revealed their new expansion, Beyond Light, earlier this week. However, when the presentation started, the first thing they did was dedicate the first 8 minutes and 46 seconds to George Floyd. They started by saying that for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, this man had a knee to his neck, cried out for help, and he was, and the life. It's words like sentence at a time, flashing on screen. And then eventually they got to different charities that you could donate to help the cause. And they sat there for the entire 8 minutes and 46 seconds and counted it down to 0. And I cannot commend them enough for it. That took a lot of stones to start your presentation like that in this current situation. And for them to bring it to their forefront, bring it to an industry that was starving for new news after everything had been delayed, and rightfully so, the week before because of the George Floyd protests, and to say, hey, this isn't going away just because we're talking about video games now. You need to keep up on it. We're going to remind you, here it is absolutely commendable. I was hoping that Sony and other companies would do it too. They did not to that extent. IGN was mentioning different places you could donate during their expo presentations, and I'm not entirely sure that Sony, in retrospect, did anything at all. I'd have to go back and watch it again. I don't remember anything in theirs. They stayed completely out of it. But I really, really, really respect Bungie for starting that Destiny 2 presentation with a full 8 minutes and 46 seconds of silence dedicated to George Floyd and the protests. So props to you for a very effective way to bring attention to the situation, and I hope that social conscience continues from them and from other companies throughout the summertime. So that was really, really, really a really cool, really neat tribute. Definitely taking advantage of their platform to bring attention, as they should. Finally, on my speedrun list is a big announcement from IGN Expo yesterday. The announcement of the Arcade 1-Up new cabinets. Arcade 1-Up is a company that makes at-home arcade machines. You buy the kits from Walmart or other stores. You build them based on the directions that it comes with, and then all of a sudden you're playing classic arcade games. They have a whole slew of machines that you can choose from right now. Everything from Golden Tee, the golf games that you find in the bars, to Pac-Man, to any classic arcade game. There might be a machine, or there's one coming out. These guys do a really good job of bringing the arcade experience to your home. And they announced the next 4 machines in their lineup during the IGN Expo on Wednesday. The first being Miss Pac-Man, Galaga, and a few other Namco games in a beautiful blue cabinet that looks just like the old cabinet that you would still see in arcades to this day. I know the Gateway 26 in North Wildwood still has one full-size Miss Pac-Man cabinet. Just a beautiful machine, and that's what this mini version looks just like one of those. A pinball machine with Marvel Pinball from Zen Studios, Virtual Pinball, which is very cool for the pinball enthusiasts. Not a huge table, but definitely enough to get your pinball fix. They announced a Big Buck Hunter for the home arcade system, the deer shooting or the deer hunting game that you'll sometimes see at bars next to Golden Tee. But then also the X-Men vs. Street Fighter machine, which is bringing 4 Capcom fighting games, 3 of them crossovers between Marvel and Capcom or Street Fighter, plus a 5th Marvel adventure game. and I cannot say enough about how awesome this is for multiple reasons. The first is that these games are coming back. That's enough. That right there should be enough. But secondly, the Marvel vs. Capcom property is seen as troubled by fans, just because after Disney bought Marvel, there wasn't a lot of discussions for a very long time. And then they finally came to the table. They finally hashed something out, and we finally got a new Marvel vs. Capcom in 2017 with Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, and it just did not live up to the hype. It played very well. The core gameplay was very good, but everything else around it was just not becoming of a Marvel vs. Capcom game. Not of the quality that the fans expect, and some key characters were missing, particularly like Wolverine of the X-Men. How you have a Marvel game and don't have Wolverine is beyond me, but they did that, so the fact that this arcade machine is coming out kind of lights a little fire under me that Marvel vs. Capcom may not be quite done yet, and that would be great if that were true. Hoping against that, hoping against hope for that. But for now, the fact that the cabinet exists and is coming out this fall is very, very cool. But with that, that's the end of the speed run, and more importantly, that is the end of the first ever episode of Cheesesteaks and Controllers. I want to thank everyone once again for sticking with me on this. It has been a journey, but I have enjoyed talking to you tonight about video games and esports. I enjoyed running down what Overwatch is. I enjoyed letting you know what's coming out this week. I really, really did enjoy it. I want to thank Sean Brace and everyone at Fox PHL The Gambler for giving me this opportunity. I also want to thank, and I would be remiss if I did not thank this person, that song you heard at the beginning of the show, the 8-bit NES remix of the classic Rocky theme, was given to me by a wonderful chiptune artist by the name of Rakowas. One of my best friends in the world, was a groomsman at my wedding. Just a great dude. His name is Ralph. He made that music for me years ago for a podcast that I was going to start on my own that never came to fruition. And I'm glad that I get the opportunity to use it here and let everyone hear his excellent work. You can find him on YouTube. Search for Rakowas. He does 8-bit remixes of popular music, as well as some 16-bit that sound like they're from the Sega Genesis. Definitely recommend looking up his work. It's great music to work to. It's great music to work out to. And it really puts a cool twist on modern music by making it sound like it came from an old video game console. So thank you to him for creating my theme music here. Thank you once again to the Fox PHL The Gambler team for letting me talk about games for an hour. This is Jason Fanelli, the Esports Insider, signing off until next week. Thank you all for listening. Have a great week.
You